Episode 38 of the Unscripted Company podcast. We still got the lights down low. We're still deep in spooky season. Riley, I know we were kind of talking before we started to record, but there's so much going on. And we mentioned this last week too. There's so much going on in the world around us, even though right now this is a spooky season related episode and we have a few more of these left. But I just want to mention, did you see Donald Trump working at McDonald's today?
I did see that.
For those of you that are listening and you have no idea, so this is October 20th. Trump, I guess, to make like a statement, he went to go work a couple hours at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania. I'm not sure where exactly in Pennsylvania, but I just recommend Googling it or going on your preferred social media platform. Look up the videos because he has some really clever one-liners, and just seeing him do that was unique, to say the least. And a lot of this context too, if you're watching this in the future, I mean, we're only 3 weeks away from the presidential election. So I know this episode we're going to be talking about haunted and spooky locations around the world, but I just had to pause and get a good chuckle there for a second of the former president, potentially the president-elect. We'll see how November goes, but making fries at the local McDonald's.
I mean, he's at least one of the few that'll actually step foot in places like that. I mean,
that is true.
No offense, but when Kamala Harris was at her rally, she was like, I don't know if you saw this too, but someone yelled out and they were like, "Christ is Lord," or "Jesus is my Savior," or something like that. She was like, she straight up was just like, with a straight face, "You're at the wrong rally. We're not here for that." She was like, "You could take that down to that smaller rally down the street."
Whoa, I did not catch that.
Like, I saw it today on Twitter, and I was just browsing around, and I was like, interesting. I was like, got it.
Interesting.
And people, and like a lot of the people that support her and support that, what they're about, were cheering on for it and everything. And it was funny, but I'm like, hey, at least Trump's down there mingling with the people whose votes are going to matter, and who are actually wanting, a better life, so.
Yeah, man, I'm just thinking, not to go down that rabbit hole, but that's like the wrong way to say that. There's a way you can phrase it to where you kind of, you clap back at the person that shouted that out. But I feel like you do more harm than good by saying it in that nature. And I'm sure there's a bunch of other things, that the other side of the aisle says that people could make the same argument about. I get it, but
right.
Needless to say, I'm ready for spooky season to be over. I love spooky season. I know we got some more left, but man, just to get us all caught up on what the heck's going on in the world outside of spooky season.
We have got we're going to have a juicy episode. Like, I'd be remiss to say, like, it's going to be the length of one of our live streams with probably how much stuff we're going to have to talk about. So definitely you don't want to miss that episode when it comes out. But no, it'll be interesting to see. I know I've been watching a lot of Charlie Kirk stuff, and apparently he was at UNT. Didn't know that.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
He came to UNT, and I was like, man, if I would have known, I would have went up there to UNT. I would have been like, yo, man, like, if I get one of your books, like, could I send it to you? You send it back with it signed or something, like, just straight up. Because I mean, he's one of the few people, like, he doesn't carry like a radical left, like right point of view, but he thinks of things like objectively, not subjectively. And so like, I just like listening to him talk and his points of views on things, because and I'll do my own research afterwards just to see what's up. But a lot of people that just come up there and just start throwing accusations out there, and he's like, hold on now. So it's fun stuff. But anyways.
No, yeah. So this week on episode 38, we got haunted locations. I think that's what we're going to settle on, the nomenclature for how we're going to be talking about this. I know on my side, I got the catacombs. I got a haunted prison out in Philadelphia. Yeah, in Philadelphia. I got Skinwalker Ranch. On your side, I know you have an island I have not heard about in Italy, so I know we'll dive into that. We got classic Chernobyl, and then the Screaming Tunnel, which I have not heard about this. So I'm actually kind of excited to learn about yours, because I've only recognized one of the three on your side. So that being said, do you want to go first? We didn't really talk about this before I hit record on. Do you want to go first with yours? Or?
I mean, I guess I can. Yeah, I guess I can go first this week.
Yeah.
switch it up a little bit. So my first one is the Poveglia Island in Italy. I hope I pronounced that right for any of our studying abroad people. If I did not, then I'm sorry.
Apologies to our Italian audience out there.
So we're gonna kind of stick to the narrative form. Now for the coming episodes in the next couple weeks, probably not, but we're gonna stick to the narrative form tonight. Pretty sure that's kind of what you did as well. But Poveglia Island, shrouded in mist and mystery, lies quietly in the Venetian lagoon between Venice and Lido, an eerie contrast to the beauty of the surrounding waters. For centuries, this small island has been a place where history and horror have intertwined, leaving behind an unsettling legacy that has given Poveglia the reputation as one of the most haunted locations on Earth. Its dark past, steeped in death, suffering, and madness, has made it the subject of countless ghost stories and legends. Today, the island remains abandoned, its crumbling ruins standing as silent witnesses to the horrors that once unfolded there. It all began in the 14th century during one of the deadliest outbreaks of the Black Plague. Venice, fearing the rapid spread of the disease, designated Poveglia as a quarantine station. It was here in isolation that the sick and dying were banished, torn from their families and communities. Plague ships would arrive filled with the doomed, and the island quickly became a mass grave. The bodies of the dead were piled high and burned, with the ashes of thousands mixing into the island's soil. For many, Poveglia was not just a quarantine island, it was a death sentence. People sent there never returned. Years passed, the island's role as a place of exile and death did not change. With every new outbreak of plague and disease, Poveglia became a pit of despair. Victims, some still alive, were thrown into massive burial pits alongside the corpses of those already lost. It is said that the island's soil today is composed of nearly 50% human ash. The pain and fear of those who perished have, according to legend, soaked into the very land itself, making it a cursed place that many Venetians avoided at all costs.
That's crazy.
I know. Keep in mind, I'm just going to tell you straight up, I didn't read any of this again.
Are you learning this in real time as well? Oh my gosh, I love it.
Hey, but this is Unscripted Company, though, so this is exactly what it's all about.
No, yeah, I'm looking up this place real quick too, and here I'll throw this up while you
go
keep
for
reading. I have the location.
So if you look, it's actually not that far off, like the coast of Italy. Like it's actually like when you look at it relative to where the actual main island is at, it doesn't look that big, but you have to think like 2/3 of Europeans people died, but how many of those people were actually in Italy and how many of those people actually got sent there?
That's crazy too. I'm almost, before you started reading and I just quickly saw like this image of it, I thought maybe this was like the Alcatraz of Italy potentially. So it's interesting.
Right.
They just threw dead people here.
Right. They just threw dead people here. Let's see here. I'm just going to do that right there. All right. So during the Napoleonic Wars in the 18th century, the island saw yet more violence. Napoleon Bonaparte used Poveglia as a military outpost and a storage site for weapons. The island's ancient church, once a place of worship, became a storehouse for gunpowder. Some soldiers were executed there, their blood further staining the island's troubled history. It was during this time that rumors of restless spirits began to grow, with many soldiers claiming they had seen ghostly figures in the fog. But the darkest chapter in Poveglia's history came in 20th century when a mental asylum was established on the island.
Lovely. So mental asylums always end up being great ideas.
Dude, I'm telling you, man. Hold on. Let me actually pull this up too while I'm still reading. The hospital was a place of horror where the mentally ill were subjected to brutal and often inhumane treatment. It's always inhumane.
Apparently.
Especially in those time periods. One tale, which has passed down through generations, speaks of a doctor who performed cruel experiments on the patients, including lobotomies. It's always lobotomies,
I always love a good lobotomy.
And other gruesome procedures. His reign of terror reportedly ended when he was driven mad by the spirits of the island, the tortured souls of plague victims and hospital patients alike. In his madness, he is said to have thrown himself from the top of the island's bell tower. Though he survived the fall, he was allegedly suffocated by a mysterious mist that rose from the ground, an act of revenge by the very spirits he had tormented. Oh my gosh.
As if gravity wasn't a big enough enemy to have. You also have this like mist.
Right. The hospital eventually closed in 1968, and since then, Poveglia has remained abandoned, but has never been forgotten. Locals still tell stories of the island, and few are brave enough to visit, believing the souls of the dead continue to roam its shores. Fishermen in the area avoid the waters surrounding the island, fearful of catching human bones in their nets. Those who have ventured onto Poveglia report feelings of overwhelming dread as soon as they step foot on the island. Visitors often claim to hear ghostly whispers, distant screams, and the eerie sound of a bell ringing from the island's tower, though the bell itself was removed long ago.
Interesting.
Perhaps the most terrifying accounts come from those who have seen shadowy figures darting in and out of the ruins, as if watching from the dark corners. Others have felt an unseen presence following them, a cold, oppressive force that lingers. It is as though the very air on Poveglia is thick with the memories of the thousands who died there, their spirits forever trapped in a place where their suffering was so great. Over the years, Poveglia has attracted paranormal investigators, thrill seekers, and ghost hunters, all eager to experience the island's haunted atmosphere. Many have left convinced that the island is alive with supernatural activity. Television shows like Ghost Adventures have documented chilling encounters on Poveglia, cementing its place as one of the most haunted places in the world. In 2014, the Italian government made an attempt to lease the island to developers, hoping to repurpose it for modern use. Hell no! Nah.
Yeah, we're gonna put a Hilton hotel right there. It's gonna be great. We're gonna put a La Quinta.
Dude, no, man, no. But the haunting legacy of Poveglia proved too strong. No one dared to claim it. The island remains untouched. Its decaying buildings and overgrown landscapes slowly being reclaimed by nature. Yet the stories persist, passed down by those who still remember its dark past. It is said that the spirits of plague victims, soldiers, and tortured souls from the asylum continue to wander the island, unwilling or unable to leave. Poveglia is more than just an abandoned island. It is a place where history and legend have fused, where the weight of death and despair is palpable into the air. Though uninhabited, it is far from empty, haunted by the memories of many who met their end on its shores. Visitors who come to Poveglia may find themselves face to face with the island's tragic past, their steps echoing through the ruins, accompanied by the whispers of those long dead.
Can you imagine being one of the last hospital patients that were there in the 60s? Like, I forget what year you said, but I think it was like early 60s when they shut it down. But can you imagine all the lore that people would have been aware of at the time of how many people had died or been brought dead onto that island, and then be like, yeah, I'm gonna go get, whatever operation procedure. Maybe you have a cold, I don't know, but you're like sitting there in this like hospital room, and it's like, like millions of people have died here.
Can you imagine just like that's the definition of an insane asylum though? Because if like you're the last one there and you're just chilling, but like
oh wait, was it an insane asylum last, or I thought it was like a hospital after that, wasn't it?
So it was a mental asylum.
Oh, okay.
Established on the island in it came in the 20th century. So
also imagine being the last one out.
Right. So I don't know. I think I've brought this up to you. Do you have Amazon Prime Video?
Yeah, I don't ever use it, but
okay. So like they've got some good stuff on there. Like I mean, I'll be honest. Like I kind of don't like the fact that you have to pay to not have ads anymore. Like you used to be able to just pay for your Amazon Prime and it would be fine. It's
sneaky,
like $3. It's like extra $3 a month. Anyways,
but still, it's an extra $3.
There's two movies. There's a part 1 and a part 2. They're kind of like those cheesy ghost movies. I highly recommend y'all give it a watch. But it's called Grave Encounters.
Grave Encounters. Is it like a spoof movie, but based on like ghost hunters kind of thing?
So kind of like, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a spoof, but it has some spoof like, vibes to it. But these people go to this mental hospital, and both movies are regarding the same location, but it's actually pretty trippy though. Like I just give it a watch. Like we were wanting to watch them again, but we didn't know where they were at. And then I came across them yesterday. I was like, oh, here they are. Let's watch them. So if you get the chance, like it's a good like spooky type movie. But like, I mean, we watch like YouTube ghost hunters, people that do stuff for their YouTube channels and stuff, but like that are prominent people.
Yeah.
We watch stuff like that, but it's kind of similar to that, but you know.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Haunted Island.
Haunted Island. It's kind of funny because when you're reading into that too, my first one is the Catacombs. And I was sitting here thinking, these are both of our first picks have to do with places where thousands, if not millions of bodies were, relocated to basically. So
I was going to do the Catacombs too. And then I saw you had it and I was like,
yeah,
but I mean, hey, it's all good though. Cause I mean, I'm all about finding new places though. It's pretty cool.
But yeah. All right. Let me throw this up here for us. The Catacombs of Paris.
Dude,
so I know it's just the photos alone, even without reading context on it, just seeing the number of skulls and bones and
have you seen the movie As Above, So Below?
Yes.
So every time I see the Catacombs, I think about that movie and I'm like, dude, it's real.
Yeah, it's literally the opening to hell, basically. So we've all heard of Paris, the city of light, the romance, the food, the art. But beneath those charming streets, under all that beauty and history, there's something much darker. A hidden city stretching for miles, a labyrinth of the dead, the Catacombs of Paris. Now, for those of you that aren't aware of the catacombs, this isn't your average cemetery. It's actually an underground ossuary that holds the bones of over 6 million people. 6 million lives tucked away below the ground, out of sight, skulls and femurs stacked in neat little rows, lining the tunnels like some twisted art installation. You never know it walking through the Parisian boulevards, sipping your cafe, latte, but you're actually walking over centuries of dead people and just centuries of piled up death. But the question is, how did it get this way? So a little bit of a backstory here to then come back up to the why it's haunted. So back in the day, 1700s, Paris had a big problem, a really big problem. Their cemeteries were overpacked. They basically packed too many dead people in too little of a space. And so you literally had graves of dead people busting at the seams. So in some cases, walls around the graves would overflow or fall over. And so you'd have decaying bodies that would spill into the streets. So imagine if you came home one day, and I know in Texas we don't have basements, but let's pretend you have a basement. Let's just assume that because the cemetery next door got so full that the wall of your basement caved in. And so a bunch of bodies, dead bodies that had been there for a hot second, come flooding in. This was happening to people more often than not. So they had to find a way to fix it, basically. And what they did to start fixing this was moving bodies underground into old limestone quarries that were beneath the city of Paris. So starting in the year 1786, they started to haul bones off through the streets in the dead of night so no one would really see them. And they just do it via a wagon system. So they'd use wagons night after night until the bones of all the dead Parisians were crammed into this underground, what used to be a quarry, basically. But at first, it wasn't an organized affair. So we see in these photos here, the skulls are all nicely lined up and the bones are stacked and yada, yada. That came much later after the fact. Initially, they actually just dumped all the bodies in here. It's just no organization to it. They're just just get these below ground, make sure people don't see it, and just get it out of the way, basically. It's
can you imagine being that guy being sent down there and just hey, we want you to organize all of this and do all this? How much money would you want to be paid to do that? How much would it take for you to be that person?
It would take a lot. Probably not as much as some. I don't know. I do it for high six figures, I don't need to be making $1 million a year doing it, but I want to get paid, 400 or 500K. I'll make it work.
Yeah.
But you definitely would have to have therapy and learn how to disassociate your emotions from it, because the mental scarring that would occur from having a job like this.
I can't imagine.
Yeah. So initially they're just dumping bodies underground, no organization to it, until the early 1800s. This guy, I'm going to butcher his name, but it's Louis Etienne Hedicotte de Thury. probably mispronounced that. But when he came along, he had the wise idea of like, hey guys, what if we make this look somewhat ornate? So he kind of had the idea of let's put the bones in intricate decorative patterns, making like what we see in the photos here, basically the wall decorations, and if you want to call it decorations. But he basically is credited with turning the catacombs into what we consider or think of today. So before this, we see all these skulls on the wall. Just imagine just bodies lying all over the place. So he's credited for that. But here's where it gets creepy. So the catacombs are more than just a graveyard. People say they're haunted, apparently, word on the street. And really, how could they not be? If you think about it, 6 million people, dead people, crammed into tight tunnels, often buried without any ceremony whatsoever. Their bodies are just dumped into the dark. Some souls aren't going to rest that easily. So visitors into the catacombs, because you can, when you go to Paris, actually get tours, partial tours of certain aspects of the catacombs. And so some visitors have reported hearing whispers down there, disembodied voices that seem to rise up from the walls of the bones that line them. They also hear low murmurs that apparently, they'll send chills up your spine. Some say they've even seen shadowy figures flickering just beyond the reach of their lights. It's like something or someone is always watching you down there. It's not that hard to believe if you think about it, because the air is heavy, it's oppressive, it's cold, it's dark down there. And so it kind of gets your brain, in a not normal state of mind. Then you have this guy. I'm going to mispronounce his name too, but it's Philibert Asper. Or Aspart. I think it's Asper, though. I think the T is silent on that one. He was a doorkeeper at the Val de Grace Hospital back in 1793. And for reasons still unclear to us today, he decided to venture into the catacombs, supposedly searching for a wine cellar. I'm not kidding. Word on the street was he literally went down there to go find a wine cellar. Armed with only a candle, because this was only 1793, he wandered deep into the tunnels of the catacombs, and that was it. He got lost, and no one knew where he went until his body happened to pop up 11 years later, deep within the catacombs. Just a skeleton slumped against a wall, still holding his hand out like he was trying to find his way out. And now, people say his ghost still haunts the tunnels. He's been seen wandering near the spot where his body was found, like he's forever searching for the way out that he, never found it in his lifetime, at least. So it's kind of crazy. Like, dude went down there. Yeah, it was the late 1700s, so maybe some of this got, misreported, but home guy went down there, never came back up, and 11 years later is when they found his body. And so it's not just the old legends, like this guy we were just talking about. The catacombs are huge. So just for perspective here, there's over 200 miles of tunnels in the catacombs. Much of it are still unexplored to this day and are off limits. Like, you cannot go there. Even the official tourist path is just a small fraction of the overall stretch of tunnel, and yet people still sneak in. They call themselves the cataphiles, so they're obsessed with the catacombs down there.
Never heard from again.
Dude, basically, like, looking into this, like, all I could think of was the As Above, So Below movie in terms of just what happens when you go a little too far down there.
Right.
Yeah. And just for a reminder, like, when you go so deep down here, like, right, I know you know this, but for those of you listening, like, it's pitch dark. There's no light. Like, it's all you. The air is super not breathable down there either, just because oxygen doesn't make its way down there that often. And it's not just a playground for the adventurous. In 2004, the Paris police actually stumbled upon something very bizarre down there. They found a fully functioning movie theater in one of the chambers. Now, they had like a giant big screen. They had projectors. They had seats, even a fully stocked bar and restaurant with tables and chairs. But here's where it gets really interesting. When the police came back later to investigate further, everything was gone. There's no trace of it. It just disappeared. No one knows. Yeah.
We'll talk about some stuff after you get done, but
yeah. So the catacombs, of course, they have a long history of secrets. During the French Revolution, monarchists were dragged down there in those tunnels and were killed. During World War II, the Nazis used the catacombs to hide a bunker beneath the city. Over the years, they've seen violence, death, and darkness beyond just the bones that line the walls. There's something about that place, some energy, some presence. It's like the catacombs themselves are alive, breathing, and waiting. The Nazis, the revolutionaries, the millions of forgotten Parisians, they're all still down there in one way or another. And then there's a question of all the rituals. Who knows what people have done down there over the centuries in the deep hidden corners no one has ever explored. And here's the kicker. They even filmed the movie As Above, So Below, which we've talked about, down there. They actually filmed it down there. So that's kind of interesting as well. But you basically have the Catacombs of Paris, super haunted. Long story short, 6 million souls down there.
So, first off, I mean, there's probably going to be a few things I actually kind of want to touch on. So, like, why do they not have it guarded better so that people can't just go down there? I mean, there's probably multiple entrances, if I'm being honest. For it being 200 miles worth of tunnels, there's got to be multiple entrances. But it's like, why? How are they still, like, I guess maybe they probably haven't found all the entrances yet. But for me, you know, they have the touring area and stuff like that. But it's like, what possesses people to be like, I want to go explore this and see what happens? And then it's like, you don't prepare enough, and then you just find your way down there, and then you're just like stuck, and then you can't get out. Like, I wonder when that finally sinks in for people who go down there and they're like, oh wait, I actually can't find my way out of here anymore.
I think that's the problem, and I think you said it perfectly. It's the people that don't think it through. They aren't premeditated enough to like prepare themselves to go down there. And the reason why I don't think it's as guarded as heavily as, you know, in a perfect world it should be is why bother?
Right.
You know, if someone goes down there and gets lost, that's their fault.
Right. I will say this too. Like, I feel like a lot of other countries are definitely, like, when it comes to teaching like history and stuff like that, they definitely take, you know, they enjoy teaching history. I wonder if they still teach today's kids about the catacombs and still tell them about it.
I'm sure they do. It was a big, you know, it's kind of like a big thing in French history, right?
Right.
Because it also has to do with like Napoleon, you know, how Paris has been leveled multiple times and he just built on top of it.
I mean, when it comes to catacombs, I mean, almost every like historical city, which I mean, every city to an extent has history behind it, but you got like those few, like the town of Salem, even Denton itself, like we've got history, and we've already been we've already known that there's underground tunnels and catacombs here in Denton. Like, we know that there are. I'm pretty sure there's some back home in Paris where I grew up at. Like, things like that exist. Like, and they exist in more places than what people think. It's just a matter of if you're able to find it or not. Like,
that's true.
I actually bartended at a place here in Denton on the square. And in one of the very, very back rooms, there was actually like a giant crack in the wall that actually you could go down, and so I was like, no. And it was in the old Sweetwater building.
Oh,
so I bartended at a restaurant that was there, or at a bar that was there. And so that was one of the few places I was like, no, I'm good.
Yeah. Well, then, like, I know, like in the Northwest, the Pacific Northwest, you had, what do they call them? Shanghai tunnels.
Mm-hmm.
Where, like, back in the day, they would like kidnap people through trap floors in the ground.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. When it comes to the catacombs, like, I'm the same as you. I think about that movie As Above, So Below. If for any of our listeners or viewers, if you've not watched that movie, I'm surprised, because it's been out for like a decade, almost. I think it was like 2017, 2018, something like that.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
So it's been out for a long time.
Yeah.
Watch it, especially during, you know, Halloween, spooky time. It's a good movie, a very trippy movie, but I recommend watching it because it really showcases what could potentially be, you know, down there, you know, as far as like, you know, when people travel down there and they get lost, you know, there's a lot of stuff that goes on there. So
yeah,
we both recommend, check it out. So my second one, and I didn't even know that there was this much about this place. Like, I knew that there was a history behind it, but I did not know that there was a paranormal history behind this location. Pripyat and Chernobyl, pretty much the same thing, but Chernobyl is in your for those of you who don't know, is in Ukraine. And so just kind of go into it. It says, in the quiet, forgotten corner of northern Ukraine, nestled near the Belarusian border, lies a place where time stopped on a fateful day of April 1986. Pripyat, once a vibrant city built for workers of the nearby Chernobyl nuclear power plant, now stands as a ghost town. Let me just also too preface by saying, like, that place was well ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Like if you've seen pictures of before the nuclear explosion and stuff like that, like everything that they had built out there, like for the people who worked in that kind or like that city, it was well ahead of its time. Like it's a tragedy as to how that happened, but its streets are silent, its buildings decaying, and its playgrounds are eerily still. This is a city abandoned in the wake of one of the most catastrophic nuclear disasters in history, the Chernobyl explosion. The story begins on April 26, 1986, when a routine safety test at reactor number 4 went horribly wrong. In the dead of night, a sudden explosion tore through the reactor, sending a deadly plume of radioactive material into the air. The explosion was heard miles away, but the residents of Pripyat, just 3 kilometers from the plant, had no idea of the invisible threat that had just been unleashed. For hours, the city carried on as normal. Children played, people went to work, unaware that radiation levels were skyrocketing. By the following day, Pripyat's streets filled with buses and a hurried evacuation was ordered. People were told to pack a few belongings, leave their pets, and that they would return in a few days. Little did they know they would never come back. Pripyat was abandoned, a Soviet city frozen in time. Its schools, hospitals, and homes left exactly as they were on that tragic day. Now overgrown with trees and plants that seem to burst through every crack, Pripyat has become a chilling monument to the past. Walking through the city today, you feel the eerie silence, the sound of wind rustling through broken windows, and the occasional creak of decaying buildings are the only reminders of the life that once thrived here. The rusting Ferris wheel stands motionless in town square, a relic of joy that never got its chance to turn. And yet, despite its abandonment, Pripyat is not entirely empty. There are whispers of something else lingering, something unseen but felt by those who dare to enter the city's haunted ruins. Just take a look at those photos. Like for those of you who are not in video land, but we are looking at photos of what Chernobyl looked like, or what it currently looks like now. And if we could ever come up with any pictures of what it looked like previously, we would. But I don't think there's a whole lot of those pictures now.
I think I can find some.
Yeah. Since the evacuation, stories of paranormal activity have emerged from the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Some who visit speak of strange shadows moving in the windows of empty buildings. The hospital, where many of the first responders to the disaster were treated, is notorious for such sightings. Visitors report fleeting glimpses of figures standing motionless as if watching from the darkness. These shadowy forms, described as indistinct and ominous, vanish just as quickly as they appear, leaving behind an unsettling sense of being watched. The paranormal claims don't stop with visual phenomena. As you walk through Pripyat's abandoned streets, you might hear something strange. Faint, disembodied voices echoing in the distance. Some say they heard snippets of conversations, laughter, or even the soft ring of a telephone, as though the ghosts of the city's former residents are still trying to go about their daily lives. Others have reported hearing frantic cries for help, echoing the chaos and confusion of the evacuation, while the footsteps clatter in hallways that should be empty. But perhaps the most chilling legend ties to Chernobyl is that of the Black Bird of Chernobyl. In the days leading up to the disaster, several workers at the plant claimed to have seen a terrifying creature with large wings, glowing red eyes flying overhead. Those who witnessed the bird were plagued with nightmares and strange phone calls, warnings of impending doom. After the reactor exploded, the sightings stopped and the creature became part of the area's mythology, an omen of disaster forever linked to the tragedy. Today, Pripyat and the surrounding Chernobyl exclusion zone are often described as a place suspended between life and death. The silence is oppressive, broken only by the occasional eerie sound, and the desolate streets give the impression that the city itself is holding its breath. Some attribute these paranormal occurrences to the immense suffering endured during the disaster. The thousands of lives lost, the families torn apart, and the countless people whose lives were forever changed by the radiation they could not see. Chernobyl's haunting legacy is not just about ghostly figures or eerie sounds. It's about the human tragedy that unfolded there. In the days, weeks, and years after the explosion, the true toll became clear. The first responders, known as the liquidators, were exposed to lethal doses of radiation as they fought to contain the disaster. Many of them died or suffered from the long-term effects of the radiation. Their heroism, though largely forgotten by the world, is remembered in the exclusion zone, where their presence is still felt in the abandoned remnants of their work. Even now, more than 3 decades later, radiation lingers in the soil and air, while much of the area remains off limits. The exclusion zone has become a strange paradox of destruction and rebirth. With humans gone, nature has reclaimed the land. Forests have grown thick, and wild animals roam the streets of Pripyat, and life, in some ways, has flourished. Wolves, deer, and boars wander through the crumbling structures, unaware of the radiation that still lurks beneath the surface. It's a strange, almost surreal ju- juxtaposition. I don't know how to say that word.
Juxtaposition.
Life flourishing in a place marked by death. Tourists and paranormal investigators alike are drawn to the exclusion zone, seeking to experience the surreal atmosphere of Pripyat and to perhaps catch a glimpse of the supernatural. Many come hoping to hear or to see or hear something that confirms the stories of ghostly encounters, while others are simply there to bear witness to the silent testimony of a world left behind. The ghost city of Pripyat, with its decaying buildings and silent streets, is more than a relic of the Soviet era. It's a place where history, tragedy, and paranormal converge. The haunting stories that come from its ruins, whether born of myth or reality, only deepen the sense of loss and sadness that hangs over the city. Pripyat is haunted not just by the ghosts of those who once lived there, but by the memories of a disaster that forever changed the world. In the end, the ghosts of Chernobyl are not just shadowy figures or strange lights. They are the echoes of the past, reminders of the human cost of this terrible disaster, and of a city that, even in its abandonment, refuses to be forgotten.
Go back to the you said the black bird. I had never heard that piece before.
I didn't either.
Yeah, so people were claiming that they saw this, I'll just say, black demonic bird flying over Chernobyl before the incident occurred.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
And it could be like a Russian, kind of like how we have our like myths per se. It could be something similar to that.
Yeah.
Like a bad omen kind of thing.
That's interesting.
Have you ever seen the movie Chernobyl? I
haven't seen the movie, but unless you're talking about the HBO miniseries.
No. Like there's a movie called Chernobyl.
Okay.
I think it's called Chernobyl Diaries or something like that.
Okay.
And it's kind of meant to be like a horror film kind of thing. But this two couples, I think it's like 4 or 5 people, something like that, maybe 6 people, but they want to go to Chernobyl, and they find this tour guide who is willing to take them there, and things go south very, very quick. And so, but it talks about a lot of stuff like this, like where it talks about, let's see here. Where did I see that at? The paranormal claims don't stop with the visual phenomena. As you walk through Pripyat's abandoned streets, you might hear something strange, faint, disembodied voices echoing in the distance. Some say they heard snippets of conversations, laughter, or even the soft ring of a telephone. So they hear that. And then in the other paragraph says, visitors report fleeting glimpses of figures standing motionless as if watching from the darkness. There's things like that in the movie. I recommend watching it. It's kind of cheesy sometimes, but like if you watch it for the first time, like it's pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. There's also, what do they call it? Back when Vice used to be more edgy and not what it is today, Shane Smith did a thing where he went over there. It was like a 2 or 3 part series where he kind of snuck in with the whole crew and everything and had a tour guide and all that. And they went around and just seeing the radiation levels. But then also HBO did a really good like a mini series on it. It was like a fictionalized version of the Chernobyl meltdown. I
haven't watched it yet, but it's on my list.
It's very good.
Yeah.
It's very depressing, but it's very good.
I mean, dude, I can't imagine. Like, it doesn't surprise me though that there's like, haunted stuff, like as far as like, paranormal stuff there, because you had tens of thousands of people, like if not more, that just lost their lives. Like, very few people even got out, and if they did get out, they still had radiation poisoning, so like they were still going to die either way.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a very much so of a tragedy, but it doesn't surprise me though that it being haunted the way it is because it's been so desolate for so long. So
yeah,
but just nobody could really go there to see because radiation levels are still too high, which blows my mind that 30 plus years later, Like I think that they said no one would actually be able to go to it for like even the next 100 years.
Yeah, I
something
don't.
like that.
Yeah, easily like 4 lifetimes,
Yeah.
if
So
that.
it's ridiculous, but yeah, that's Chernobyl. I mean, I knew a lot about it already, but some of the stuff in there I didn't know about, and it's actually interesting to really find out and hear about.
Yeah, I never really thought about it as being like a haunted spot. Like
Mm-hmm.
I knew it was twisted, demented, dark, but I never thought about it as being haunted. Well,
Yep.
let's get dark and twisted here for a little bit.
Let's get dark and twisted.
What we have here is Eastern State Penitentiary. It's in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So, Eastern State Penitentiary looms like a fortress of despair in the heart of Philadelphia. Those gloomy high stone walls, you can see it in the top left photo here. It literally looks like a castle or like a fort, but it's a prison. They don't just keep people out, they actually hold something in. The prison's 142-year-old history is stained with pain, madness, and death. You can feel it as soon as you step inside. It's like the walls are whispering the stories of everyone who suffered here, because suffer they did. Now, this wasn't just like your normal prison. When it opened back in 1829, Eastern State Penitentiary was designed to break you as a human. They called it reform, but let's be real. It was punishment, plain and simple. And the method? Solitary confinement. Total isolation, no sound, no light, no human contact, just you and your thoughts in a tiny, cold cell. You'd eat alone, exercise alone, and sleep alone. Inmates weren't even allowed to speak. They wore hoods over their heads whenever they left their cells, like ghosts shuffling through the stone corridors. Now, believe it or not, the design was revolutionary for its time, and Eastern State Penitentiary became a model for more than 300 other prisons around the world. But the system it pioneered, it drove men mad. Suicides, psychological breakdowns, and violence were common in the prison. That kind of isolation, day after day, year after year, could turn even the strongest mind into mush. The prison eventually abandoned the solitary system, but by then the damage had already been done. Some of the punishments here were enough to chill you to the bone, literally. There was the ice water bath, where prisoners were dunked in freezing water, then hung up on a wall in winter until ice formed on their skin. Then there was what they called the mad chair, where inmates were strapped down so tightly that circulation would cut off to their limbs, sometimes so badly that amputations were actually needed after the fact. And if you spoke out of turn, there was what they called the iron gag, where they tie your hands behind your back and attach an iron collar to your mouth so that if you moved, it would rip your tongue to shreds. Blood everywhere. And that's without mentioning what they called the hole, which was a dank underground cell where prisoners were thrown into darkness, where they had no light, no human contact, no exercise, just a cold, airless pit where they were left to rot with almost no food or water. So imagine that, being buried alive while your mind slowly cracks and becomes mush. So with a history like that, it's kind of no wonder that Eastern State Penitentiary is considered to be haunted. Visitors, guards, and even other inmates have been telling stories of strange experiences since the 1940s. But it wasn't until the prison closed in 1971 and opened to the public that the floodgates really kind of opened in terms of like the lore behind the ghost stories here. You had paranormal investigators that started to dig in, and it wasn't long before the stories of ghostly encounters started to pile up. You had shows like Ghost Adventures and Ghost Hunters have all done episodes there, of course, and they call it one of the most haunted places in America. So when you walk down the crumbling corridors, it's easy to see why, and you can see that in the top right photo there. It's kind of eerie, kind of spooky. Like I would not want to be here even during the daytime. It just looks rough. The place just feels haunted. You have cell block 12, which is infamous of echoing voices and crackling laughter. You have cell block 6, where there's shadowy figures are seen darting along the walls, like someone or something is still watching. And then you have cell block 4, where visitors have reported seeing ghostly faces, pale and hollow, staring at them from outside of the cells.
Mm-mm.
And then there's the tower, so like the guard watchtower, where people claim to see the silhouette of a guard still up there, pacing back and forth. But here's the thing. The tower has been abandoned for years, and no one can get up there anymore. One of the most famous stories comes from a man named Gary Johnson. He was working on one of the old cell blocks in cell block 4. He was actually working on fixing one of the locks in the early 1990s when something happened. He said he felt a force, something powerful, grab him, holding him in place. He couldn't move. Then he saw faces, tormented faces, appear on the cell walls around him, like they were screaming out in pain. One of those forms even reached out to him, beckoning, like it wanted to pull him into the cell with them. Johnson called it a horrible energy, and to this day he swears he never felt anything like it in his life. But here's where it gets interesting. The staff at Eastern State Penitentiary, they don't lean into the ghost stories. They're not trying to push the idea that the place is haunted for the sake of tourism. They'll tell you straight up that Eastern State doesn't claim to be haunted. They're more focused on telling the stories of the people who lived and died there. Over 70,000 inmates passed through those iron gates, including some of the most notorious criminals of the 20th century. Al Capone did time there. And apparently, he wasn't immune to the place's dark energy. Capone was haunted by the ghost of James Clark, one of the victims of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, who he had ordered to be killed. Capone's guards reported hearing him scream in the middle of the night, shouting for the ghost to leave him alone. It's not often that you get to hear about a man like Capone being scared, but even at Eastern State Penitentiary, fear was part of the air you breathed. Then there was the infamous bank robber, Willie Sutton. He's said to have experienced strange things in the prison too, but maybe that's just the nature of a place like this. When so much suffering is etched into the very stone, you have to wonder, can all that pain just disappear, or does it linger a bit? And if the dark history and ghost stories aren't enough to convince you, there's the sheer atmosphere of the place. You have cracked walls, rotting cell doors, silent, empty corridors that stretch on and on like a maze you'll never find your way out of. So no wonder that when people walk through the cell blocks, they say they hear footsteps following them. So it's still open for like tourism and stuff these days, but it's a rather spooky place. And if you just look at the outside of it, it looks like a freaking castle.
Right.
But they would do all sorts of stuff here. Like you can see there's an operation chair kind of in the bottom right. So lobotomies were very much a commonplace.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just, it was a spooky place to say the least. But it was really interesting reading about even Al Capone said the place was haunted whenever he did time there.
That, and to me, it's not surprising to me that places like this are haunted, because even if you look at Guantanamo Bay, like places like that are haunted too, because you have to think in the 19th and earliest 20th century, they didn't really have regulations for what you could and couldn't do to inmates or, mental insane asylums. Like it was just like almost like a torture thing, like if you really think about it, especially like in the early 19th centuries as well, like people, like you go to prison, like you might as well just like say goodbye to the rest of your life, because you're probably going to be there for the rest of your life and whatever time frame that may look like.
Yeah. So here's a photo of what it looks like from the sky in terms of, you see the outer wall here, but then you have the cell blocks that kind of jut out. It's almost like an asterisk, like the pounds or almost like a star kind of thing going on here. And even today, like it's in the middle of like a very now dense urban environment.
But it's not even being used anymore. So why don't they just go tear it down?
I don't know. That's a great point.
Because doesn't that hurt property values? Hey, we got this haunted penitentiary right here.
Well, which is worse? Having it there and living around it, or having it gone and knowing that you're living on top of it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you can see, like, here's downtown. It's like right here.
And where's it actually at?
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. Okay.
Yep.
I don't know about it, man.
I don't know either.
It
looks like a freaking castle.
Yeah, that's. I mean, you don't see very many prisons like that anymore.
Yeah.
You have to think too. Back in those days, they probably only had like one of 5 to 10 prisons in the entire country. So it's like if you're going to go to one, you're going to go to one of those 10.
Yeah, like a lot of
And
jails, but not that many prisons per se.
mm-hmm. All right. So my last one, and I'm gonna say what I always say. I didn't read any of this. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
But it interested me, and so we're all going to be reading this, and we're doing it live.
Let's do it,
with
baby.
Unscripted Company. So my third location is called the Screaming Tunnel, and it's located in Canada or Ontario. So tucked away in the quiet countryside just outside Niagara Falls, Ontario, lies a place that seems ordinary at first glance. A small forgotten tunnel nestled beneath the old railway tracks. But as the daylight fades and the shadows lengthen, this humble passage becomes something far more sinister. The locals call it the Screaming Tunnel, a name that sends shivers down the spine of anyone who knows its dark story. The tunnel has stood for over a century, a relic of a time when it served as a simple drainage passage, but its haunting reputation has long overshadowed its practical beginnings. The tunnel's entrance, framed by moss-covered limestone, is cold and uninviting, especially as dusk settles in. The dense trees that surrounded it only add to its sense of isolation, creating an atmosphere thick with anticipation. It's not the kind of place people visit by accident. Those who make their way to the tunnel usually come with a purpose, drawn by the chilling legend that has passed through generations. Many years ago, as so the story goes, a young girl met a horrific end within the tunnel's stone walls. Some say she lived in a nearby farmhouse with her family. One fateful night, a terrible fire broke out, engulfing the home in flames. The girl, desperate to escape, ran out into the night, her clothes and body already on fire. She fled to the only place that she knew, the tunnel. But as she reached the center, the flames overtook her and she collapsed on the ground, her screams echoing through the darkness as she burned to death. Another version of the story is even darker. In this telling, the girl wasn't running from a fire, but from something far worse. Her own father, in a violent fit of rage, he dragged her into the tunnel and set her ablaze, leaving her to die in agony.
Ouch.
The details may differ, but both versions end the same way. With the young girl's death in the tunnel, her life cut tragically short, her screams forever haunting the stone-cold walls. Today, the Screaming Tunnel is a place of both fascination and fear. Visitors come from all over, eager to test the legend themselves. It is said that if you stand in the middle of the tunnel at night and strike a match, the spirit of the girl will return. As the match flickers to life, a piercing scream will rip through the silence, so loud and terrifying that it will blow out the flame, plunging you into darkness. Those who have tried claim the legend is real. They speak of hearing a high-pitched, anguished scream, a sound so full of pain and terror that it feels almost alive. Some say the scream isn't the only thing that haunts the tunnel. On particularly quiet nights, visitors have reported seeing the faint outline of a young girl at the far end of the passage, her figure barely visible in the gloom. Others have felt an unnatural chill in the air, even during the heat of the summer, as if something cold and unseen is brushing past them. The tunnel itself is not large, only 125 feet long, but stepping inside feels like entering another world. The walls are damp, the ceiling is low, making every sound echo eerily. Even the simple crunch of gravel underfoot seems unnaturally loud. As you move deeper into the tunnel, the darkness closes in, and the outside world seems to disappear. It's easy to understand why the place feels haunted, even before the screams come. But the Screaming Tunnel isn't just a place of legend, it's a real piece of local history. Built in the early 1900s, it was originally a drainage tunnel, part of a rural community that has long since disappeared. Back then, it was used by farmers to bring livestock across the tracks, and during heavy rains, water would rush through it. Over time, as the nearby homes were abandoned and the railway fell into disuse, the tunnel stood forgotten, except for the chilling stories that clung to it. As the legend grew, so did the tunnel's reputation. People came from far and wide to see for themselves whether the stories were true. Paranormal investigators, thrill seekers, and the simply curious all made their way to the tunnel, hoping to witness the supernatural for themselves. For many, the experience was more psychological than paranormal. The tunnel's isolated location, its cold, damp interior, and the terrifying story associated with it all plays tricks on the mind. The fear of what might happen, of hearing the scream, of seeing something you can't explain, makes every shadow seem darker, every sound more menacing. In the years since, the Screaming Tunnel has found its way into popular culture. The famous horror director David Cronenberg used it as filming the location for his adaptation of Stephen King's The Dead Zone in 1983, cementing its status as a place of eerie legend. The tunnel's dark history, combined with its gloomy, decaying appearance, made it a perfect backdrop for a story of terror and suspense. Yet, despite its reputation, no definitive proof of paranormal activity has ever been found. The girl who died in the tunnel, no historical records confirm her existence. The match that blows out with a scream, skeptics say it's the wind or perhaps the tunnel's natural acoustics playing tricks on the visitors. But for those who have stood in the tunnel's darkness, who have heard the scream or felt a sudden chill, explanations hardly matter. The experience is enough to leave them convinced. The Screaming Tunnel continues to attract visitors today, each one hoping to catch a glimpse or a sound of something otherworldly. Whether it's the ghost of the girl still reliving her final moments, or simply the power of a well-told story, the tunnel remains a place where the lines between legend and reality blur. As the wind whispers through the trees and the shadows lengthen, it's easy to believe that the past is not so far away, and that some screams once heard never really fade.
So would you go in the tunnel?
I would sprint through the tunnel.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't like. I mean, realistically, let's be honest here. I mean, here's my. Obviously, I'm not going to go out of my way to summon a spirit because you really never know what you're going to find. Which, by the way, we'll talk about something after you read your third one. I got something for you and Abby to check out on YouTube. It's pretty cool. But I would never go out of my way to summon a spirit because sometimes I just want to be left alone. And some spirits aren't bad. You know, maybe they're just stuck in that in-between field. They haven't moved on yet. But I'm not going to go out there and be like, hey there, spirit, I'm going to strike a match up just to get you to scream. And, you know, because if that really did happen, like whether or not it was her dad or just the fire from the house, it's still a tragedy. You know, like you don't, like I wouldn't want to go antagonize that spirit for that. Like, you know, they have ghost equipment. Like you could just go buy something and just try to communicate with them that way. Like, you know, try to have a friendly little chat. But yeah, I probably wouldn't just like go there with that sole purpose of trying to summon that spirit. But I'd probably just like fast walk or sprint through the thing just to see what happens. You know.
No,
what about you?
No.
No.
Maybe during the daytime, not at night though. Daytime, yeah, probably. Nighttime, absolutely not. My brain would play too many tricks on me at that point.
Like, what about like early morning, like dawn? Like sun's just barely coming up.
Maybe.
Okay.
What time are we thinking? Like 4 a.m., 5 a.m.?
About 5 a.m.
Yeah,
5
I'll do
to
5
6.
a.m.
Okay.
Once we're outside the witching hour, I'll risk it. I'll see what's going on.
But I mean, like I said, I places like that. Now, if it's like a haunted house and you want me to go spend like hours inside a haunted house, all right, we're gonna have to have a discussion. Like, what happened to the people here, and am I gonna get possessed or is something gonna latch onto me and follow me out of there? So
Most likely, yeah.
Yeah. So
real fear, though. It's a real fear of something
is.
latching on, coming home with you.
Right.
All right. So my last one here. I've actually talked about this one before. It was in one of our first 5 episodes. I forget which episode number. Probably should have looked it up before we started this. But if you are even remotely interested in this topic, we did a deep dive, or I guess I did a deep dive on this. One of our first 5 episodes. You can find it. But we're talking about Skinwalker Ranch. And, you know, at first glance, we'll read into some of the details here, but most people don't consider it to be haunted. It more gets grouped with the paranormal and the unknown. So my argument here is we don't know enough to know what it is, so maybe it is haunted. So without that being said, Skinwalker Ranch. So there's a patch of land out in northeastern Utah in the middle of what's called the Uinta Basin. So pretty easy to find, but it's a geographical formation, northeastern Utah, the Uinta Basin, where the impossible seems to happen every day. It's called Skinwalker Ranch. And even if you've never heard of it before, you've probably heard of the stories. UFOs, mysterious lights, cattle mutilations, and something much darker. They say this place is a portal to something beyond what we understand. Something ancient, something that has been lurking in the shadows for centuries. But let me take you back to the beginning of this story. Before all the books, before the History Channel TV show, and the wild-eyed investigators, there were the Navajo and the Ute tribes. Now, the name Skinwalker comes from the Navajo legend, and the stories are terrifying. A Skinwalker is no ordinary being. It's an evil witch, basically, a shapeshifter that can transform into animals or even other people. According to Navajo lore, skinwalkers are tied to the land, and during a long-standing conflict between the Navajo and the Ute, it's said that the Navajo cursed the land with these beings, and those skinwalkers, they're still out there, stalking the grounds of Skinwalker Ranch. Now, fast forward to the 1990s, you have the Sherman family who moves onto the ranch looking for the quiet life, just a simple place to raise some cattle. But what they found was something much more scary, nothing peaceful. It started off small. They saw strange lights in the sky, brilliant flashes, orbs floating over the fields like they were watching, studying. Then came the voices, disembodied and cold, drifting down from above with no one around them to speak them. And then things got even stranger. One night, Terry Sherman, the father, hears something outside. He steps out, and there in the yard is a wolf, but not just any wolf. This thing is massive. It's far bigger than any wolf Terry's ever seen. So, naturally, he grabs a rifle, shoots at the wolf point blank range, but the bullets do nothing. They don't even appear to slow it down. The wolf eventually just walks away. But when Terry follows, its tracks disappear. Just gone. Like it never even existed. But it wasn't just the one freak encounter. The Shermans started to report cattle mutilations. Dozens of them. Their cows were found sliced open with surgical precision. Organs had been removed without a single drop of blood left behind. No tracks. No evidence. Just these mutilated animals left out in the fields as if by, some unseen hand had done this. And for 2 years, the Shermans lived within this nightmare. And finally, they had enough. So they sold the ranch in 1996. And not for a fortune either. They weren't trying to cash in on some UFO frenzy. They just wanted to get the heck out of there. They wanted to leave whatever was haunting the land behind. And I'm going to take a pause right there. For those of you listening, if you're even remotely interested in anything in the story thus far, there's so many other things that family encountered during their time on the ranch. Like I could spend hours here talking about them, but a lot of poltergeist-like activity. So, of course, the voices, things went missing, heavy things were moved around the farm in the matter of seconds. It was wild. So they wanted to sell. I think they technically took a loss on the ranch overall. So they weren't trying to make money when they were selling. They were just like, get us the heck out of here. So they sell the ranch in 1996. And then you have Robert Bigelow, who purchased the ranch from them. Now, I don't know if that name sounds familiar to any of y'all, but it's because Bigelow is a billionaire who also just happens to be obsessed with UFOs and the paranormal. He spent his life and actually his billions of fortune looking for answers to the unknown. So when Skinwalker Ranch went up for sale, he couldn't resist. He bought the place and turned it into a research facility with his National Institute for Discovery Science, or as it's referred to as NIDS, the acronym for National Institute for Discovery Science. And they basically set up shop to investigate every inch of that property. Now, you'd think with all of Bigelow's money and all the scientific equipment that they would bring in, Bigelow would have found some smoking gun, but some undeniable proof of what was going on out there. Unfortunately, they didn't really find too much proof of what was happening, just more unknown, unanswered questions. So some of the weird phenomena that their scientists and team experienced out there. They would see glowing eyes watching the researchers from the darkness. They'd have more mutilated cattle, strange electrical malfunctions, and they'd still see those eerie orbs floating around through the sky. Sometimes they'd set up high-tech cameras or sensors to catch the activity, only to find that the equipment failed just at the right moment. Whatever was out there did not want to be caught. Now, fast forward a couple years, and NIDS disbanded in 2004. after years of research that led to more questions than actual answers. But the ranch wasn't done. In 2016, Bigelow sold the property to another guy who kept his identity hidden for the longest time. But in 2020, he made himself known. His name is Brandon Fugel. He's a Utah real estate mogul who stepped forward as the owner. And just like Bigelow, Fugel has thrown everything he can at solving the mysteries of the ranch. And of course, now the ranch is super famous because he happened to team up with the History Channel, and they made the show The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, where a team of experts armed with every scientific tool they can think of are trying to figure out just what the heck is going on this ranch. And yet, the same strange things keep happening. Equipment malfunctions, illnesses that can't be explained, voices that seem to follow people home from the ranch. And then there are the sightings, the portals, the UFOs, the shape-shifting creatures that defy explanation. Whatever it is, it's like Skinwalker Ranch is a magnet for the paranormal. Or worse, it's a doorway, potentially a gateway to something we just don't understand. But the ranch isn't the only place in the Uinta Basin that's haunted by these strange lights and bizarre occurrences. Neighbors around the area have reported seeing doorways in the sky, bright lights shaped like portals, opening up above the horizon. Cattle mutilations aren't uncommon in the area either, with cows found dead under circumstances so weird that locals don't even bother to ask what happened anymore. They know better than this now. Some of them even report unexplained illnesses after spotting these strange lights in the sky, like something out there is affecting them on a deeper, unseen level. And then there's the UFO sightings. Hundreds of them since the 1950s. People say they've seen massive flying objects, lights that move in ways no plane or helicopter could. And we're not talking about a couple of wild-eyed conspiracy theories out in the middle of the desert. These are families, ranchers, regular people, all seeing the same things, all convinced that whatever's happening at Skinwalker Ranch isn't just imagination. It's real. So what's really going on out there? We have no idea. Nobody knows. But the theories are as wild as you expect. Some people think it's extraterrestrials watching us, maybe even experimenting on cattle or on us. Others believe it's interdimensional visitors, beings from another universe slipping through in some kind of portal at the ranch, warping the fabric of reality as they come and go. Or maybe it's just the case of geophysical forces messing with their brains, seismic activity, triggering hallucinations that make people think they're seeing UFOs or strange creatures. Or perhaps it's haunted. So I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like there's just so much that goes on here.
Right.
And we don't have any answers at all.
I mean, it could have been, because I know like we did a deep dive, like you said, way back when on this. And I mean, it could be just a matter of like, because maybe the different Indian tribes messed around with some stuff that they shouldn't have messed around with, and it opened up that gateway, and it just, now it's just a breeding, a quote unquote breeding ground for just all these different things to happen, because like I know there's like this weird connection with like like your Mayan tribes, your Incans, or was it Incas or Incans, where there's been historically where they have like their specific like inscriptions and stuff like that show a higher power that has come to help them with what they, so there's been like, aliens probably mixing in with all that kind of stuff. So there could have been something similar to that. And so a lot of what people are seeing is probably, it could be a form of a different type of life. But then again, Indians are also known for the spiritual side of things. And so it could be something that could have happened with that as well. And this is just a breeding ground for just all those different things, And so at the end of the day, we're not going to know. I mean, we have to just base it off what these people are seeing. But I think there comes a period in time with, any of the things that we have talked about throughout this spooky season, that when you have so many people that are saying the same thing, like, hey, I've had this experience with this right here. It doesn't matter what the millions of people who have never gone out there before have experienced, because they haven't, but it's about what majority of the people who have gone out to these locations or who have had these experiences are saying. So it's like all the, if you have like a 75-25, people that are saying like, hey, I've experienced this, that 25% of the people who haven't experienced that, it's not really going to matter. Like, you're going to hear the majority of people saying have experienced this, and you may have some people that are just lying about it, but the overwhelming amount of people overall who have said they've experienced something, there's going to be some truth to that. So,
Dude, you hit the nail right on the head. I don't think I could say it more eloquently than that. It's just when you have so many people saying something, there's got to be some level of truth to what's happening there.
Right.
Or there's like a constant of something. Like something is causing people to have that experience, whether it's truly happening to them or not. Something is causing that experience to be had. But yeah, man, I'm trying to think, we're 2 episodes away, actually 1 episode away from our next live stream.
Right.
So for those of you who are still hanging on the line with us, first of all, thank you. We see you. We recognize you. We appreciate you. I'd be remiss if I didn't call out an opportunity for those of you, if you're still new around here, give us a like, give us a follow, a subscribe, leave a comment down below. Out of these 6 spots, which do you think was the most haunted? Have you heard of all 6 of these? Were any of them new to you? Because I know some of Riley's, I had never heard about these before. Apparently, neither did Riley. So.
Listen, man. Hey, Unscripted Company at its finest, man. You got to do what you got. You got to please the people. You got to stick to it. So
very true.
You got to do.
Yeah, but we're 1 episode away from another live stream, so definitely looking forward to everyone showing up for that. And yeah, that's all I got on my end, dude. Is you got anything else on your end at all?
So I'm gonna share, like, mainly not for the video, but just for the page, because like I said, I think you and Abby could, this would be something that y'all could check out. But so Dana watches these 2 guys. I don't watch them like a lot.
Oh, yes.
You know which 2 guys I'm talking about.
Yep. Abby's actually shown me these people before.
I guess our wives think alike at the end of the day.
Apparently.
But this is the most recent one. But this place that they went to is over at Mineral Wells.
Oh, interesting.
And so this is one of the most recent places. We watched this. It's like an hour and 30 minutes or something like that, I think.
Yeah.
But I recommend, like, we're probably going to go back and, like, we like watching, when it comes to like spooky season, I like watching stuff like this more than I like watching just the movies.
Yeah.
Because stuff like this, you actually get to find out historical facts about places. But this is their most recent one that they did, that they uploaded 9 days ago. But highly recommend, go check it out. For anyone who's into your ghost stuff, they have, one of them's legitimately like fearful of stuff like this, and the other one, he just has fun with it, and his reactions are priceless. So it's so funny.
It's a good duo. Like they play off each other real well.
100%. And so I highly recommend. This is their new YouTube channel. It's called Watcher.
These used to be part of BuzzFeed back in the day, right?
Yeah. And I think that they still have some stuff on Amazon Prime too, if I'm not mistaken, because I think that's where she watched a lot of it at too. I could be wrong, but this is their YouTube channel. Go check them out. We're not by any means affiliated with them. We're getting paid for this, but just
did you not get paid? I got a lot of money for this one. Did you not?
We're gonna talk about that afterwards.
Okay.
No, but for real though, check them out. They, like I said, they do some funny stuff, but it's cool stuff too, because you do actually see some, like, you're like, oh wow, like that's insane. So yeah, go check that out. Other than that, I mean, as kind of what we said before, we appreciate all the support. We are actually vastly approaching our 50th episode. There will be more details on that at a later date. It will be another live stream, but we're going to try to do something real special for that.
I think Riley said he was going to live stream and skydive at the same time.
Maybe. Depends on what the temperature's like outside and where I'm at.
It wasn't a no. He didn't say no, everybody.
But we do appreciate all the support. We appreciate everything everyone has done, not just monetary. And so, I mean, other than that, I mean, we enjoy it. And then we have our merch as well, if you are able to support, and more than that. But if not, we just enjoy having people here along for the ride.
Now, Riley, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you to leave the good people with your words of wisdom. It's not like we're doing a version 2 of this to make sure I bring this up at the end of the recording. So, Riley, please leave us with some wise words of wisdom.
Wise words of wisdom. I mean, kind of just repeating some, like, at least one thing that I've said the past few weeks. We know that there's an election coming up. Vote smart. Don't just vote based off of emotions. Out of any of the 6 locations that we've talked about here, or honestly just any of the so far of any of the things we've talked about, would you ever go visit them? Would you ever, whether or not you're getting paid to do so, but just as a historical fact, if you're able to go visit them, would you? And if you would, but you wanted monetary compensation, how much would you want to get paid to go see those places? Because I know a lot of people are not about the paranormal. So leave those thoughts down in the comments. We'd love to know your thoughts on all that.